briefing on ranked choice voting. I know I've gotten a lot of questions about that. The biggest barrier is that the ballot counting machines that the county has and the county administers our municipal elections weren't capable of counting ranked choice voting ballots. They have now new machines that can do that, and they were going to be doing some testing of that this month. And there's going to be an update next month about whether or not they think that this is something that we can do for the 2021 municipal elections in Salt Lake City. So, but the council is interested in pushing that forward and trying to help overcome those barriers if we can in time for this election. So the next thing that I've gotten a lot of input from residents on is about either the city ordinance regarding modified mufflers that cause exhaust or that are really loud and contribute to noise pollution. So we had paused our the city's efforts to currently the city's ordinance that does that has been held unconstitutional. So the city has to rewrite that ordinance. To do that, to rewrite an ordinance, you have to get at least 3 council members who are supportive of doing this and want to put this in priority over something else, right? Because if we add something to the attorney's drafting list, then we do that having to take something off. And so we were thinking that a better way to move forward would be to try to see if we could get something passed at the state level this session. There are 2 bills, one dealing with street racing that was going to try to get it in there, and then another one that was explicitly mentioning noise. Our lobbyists tell us that it's can be a heavy lift because if you remember a couple of years ago, the state got rid of safety inspections. So, and that's used to be where they would do, they would check to see if a modified exhaust was too loud to meet the state law. So adding this is going to be a heavy lift because the legislature has already signaled that they want to go away from regulating safety. And so, but nevertheless, there are 2 bills. We're supportive of those efforts. If those are not successful, then we'll have to go back to trying to win over another council member. We've got 2 of us who want to make this a priority. We need 1 more, ideally 2 more. So that's what I'm working on there. Oh, and then the third thing is to address, to have a comprehensive notice ordinance that would require better and more specific notification for anything that is going to require any contractor or company that's doing public utility work in the public right of way. So we would get more notice and further in advance for things like when they put in Google Fiber or when they put in a 5G wireless tower. The city can't, we don't have the authority under state law to prevent them from doing those things. They're allowed by right to install those things for public use, but we can require more comprehensive notice for both. So I've been working hard on that, and I hope that we'll be able to vote on that next month. There's some questions here in the chat. How much of a problem is our Salt Lake County clerk in the effort to move ranked choice voting? Sherry Swenson, our county clerk, has been resistant to ranked choice voting for a number of reasons. She thinks that it potentially can undermine the efforts that she and other county clerks in the state have put into mail-in voting and could decrease voter turnout. You'd have to ask her more about why she believes that, but her not having the machines and not being willing to conduct a ranked choice vote election up until now has been the biggest barrier. And so we're really hopeful that that these new machines will help overcome that barrier, and the other concerns that she has, maybe the city can help mitigate in one way or another. Mayor's first year reflection. I'm not sure what that's for. Oh, it's from Ava.
That's for, yeah, sorry,
yeah,
that's for when I'm on.
she'll explain that later. And then we've been having great meetings with, I've been joining for the Capitol Hill Neighborhood Council Transportation Committee for UTA, or with UTA, about the BRT, the bus rapid transit, and where that route should go. But I'm sure that Brian can tell you more about the details from that. But I'm happy to keep going to those meetings so that when it eventually gets to the council, I can give them the full lowdown of all of the work that's gone into it from this community. Are there any other questions?
Okay, well, thank you very much, Chris.
All right, thank you. I have to go to a legislative hearing, so it's good to see you all, and I'll see you next month.
Okay, take care.
Thanks, bye-bye.
Okay, next we'll hear from Bob Norgard, our liaison with the Salt Lake Police Department.
Hello. What in particular do you want to hear, Dave?
You're a little bit soft, a little hard to hear.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
What in particular would you like to hear?
Well, since you're kind of new to this position, in the past, we've been given kind of a breakdown of, crime in the past month in our neighborhood, some advice about, particular ways to prevent certain kinds of crimes, and but generally speaking, it's been a breakdown of the types of crimes that have occurred in our neighborhood in the previous month, and then just taking questions from the audience.
Okay, sure. From what I can tell, you folks would know more than I would. The avenues and the Capitol Hill area has been relatively quiet. We do get the occasional homeless issue call and your standard like domestic violence and burglaries and things like that. But from what I can tell, it's been fairly light. Anybody have any other insight into that?
I
Yes,
have
sir.
a question.
And I do too.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Okay, David.
Anna, go ahead.
Anna, go ahead.
Is there a hand raising thing on this?
Yeah, there is.
Okay, I couldn't find it. Sorry about that. So the other day I was taking a walk and my husband called me back saying that he heard that there was somebody with a gun walking around Marmalade. Do you know anything about that? I never heard more.
I do not. I review our watch command log every single day, and I didn't see anything to log about that. A lot of times when those calls come in of people with guns, sometimes they're guns, sometimes they're not. But with the way Utah laws are, carrying a gun is legal unless you qualify as what they call a restricted person. So, I mean, it's really hard to tell exactly what it is unless we can find that person and dig into it a little bit more.
Okay, well, thank you.
Mr. Owens.
Yes.
So Bob, kind of in light of your comment about the homeless, we've had a really, really light winter. So a lot of folks are still living up on, Victory Road. And we're kind of the gateway to the park. We see a lot of people come and go. And I'm not aggressively against that. I just kind of want to know what the city is doing and what the police department is doing and how we can best sort of, mitigate those folks. What is the police? I mean, for the most part, we don't have trouble with them.
Mm-hmm.
What's the police department seeing up there?
So as far as the Victory Road Camp goes, our Central Division Bike Squad has been up there a lot and doing what they can to clear it out. Eva, I don't know if you want to chime in on this, but we just got authorization today to go post no trespassing signs up in that camp. That camp is right on city property, so that's very easy to do. And by posting those no trespassing signs, that makes enforcement much, much easier. So with
You know, I remember a friend of mine about 40 years ago talking about prostitution on Second South. And he said, we can't fix this, we just move it. And I'm not sure that that's exactly the right answer.
well, no, it's not. I mean, our officers, they do make the stops, they do enforce the laws, but a lot of times when you have a large police presence and you make a lot of arrests, people start to recognize that, and then they do just that. David, they move somewhere else. Then we start the whole process all over again.
Again, I don't think that's solving the problem, that's just moving the problem. Is anybody here on this call with the city can chime in about how we can help mitigate that?
Well,
Yeah.
hang on a sec. Let's let Bob finish, and get all the questions for him, and then we'll let Ava speak, and she can answer your question, David.
No, I understand what you're saying, Mr. Owens. I mean, like I said, I mean, the officers are doing their jobs, making the stops and making the arrests when possible. Then when they go to that other area, we continue to do the same. It's just like when we arrest a drug dealer, 2 and 3 more come to replace him. Because and honestly, it's big business. When there's one taken out, there's somebody waiting in the wings to take their spot.
Any other questions for Bob? Randy?
I guess my question would be, you say that you can enforce no trespassing signs. As a homeowner, if we put no trespassing in our yard, is that same enforcement like at the same level available to us? I mean, I guess we've had issues with, and it's not so much people walking to the park, because anyone can do that legally. Like, as long as you're not disturbing anyone and you're not, you know, doing something illegal, I don't have a problem with someone that is experiencing homelessness versus anyone that's just generally walking. That's not my issue. My issue is more those that are stealing, or those that, I mean, before they get to that point, like, I mean, I'm just checking out your packages, I'm not taking any of them. I've gotten that before. You know, I was just looking and making sure, you know, your boxes looked good on your porch. Can we put no trespassing up so they can't cross but on the sidewalk? And how enforceable is that to us as homeowners with Salt Lake PD? If we have someone crossing over, just as you say that you can enforce it on up on that property, can you do the same enforcement, or are we given a different level of enforcement?
No, you don't need signs on your residence.
I know, but
I mean, it's nice, and it makes things nice and neat to say that, you know, this person who does not live here has no business being here, came onto my property. We can absolutely enforce somebody coming onto the curtilage of your property if they have absolutely no legitimate reason to be there.
but it's usually a 1 or 2. Like, I've had many of them cross over and they've not done the trespassing thing until it's a second or third time. Is it easier to enforce if I already have that on the property and it says no trespassing? I guess is my question.
Probably. I mean, I don't see a problem why it can't be enforced the first time.
I don't either.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Bob? Okay, Bob, thank you very much. Okay, Ava, why don't you go next?
Thank you, David. For folks that are new to the call and joining Capitol Hill, I'm Ava Lopez. I'm the community liaison for District 3 and 4. I show my face, but I have an appointment at the same time that I couldn't move, so I apologize for that. But I wanted to start out with answering the question about kind of homelessness enforcement. What's the city's plan and take on this? And I think I'm going to share a link. I shared it last time, but it's the slc.gov/homelessness dashboard. And on this dashboard, it explains kind of a breakdown of what's happening in the county and the state. And you may have heard me before mention this, but Salt Lake City actually isn't the entity that decides the larger plan or vision for homelessness. It's a coalition called the Salt Lake Valley Coalition to End Homelessness, which is compiled of different partners that we work with, such as the VOA, the state, the county, the city. I believe we have a lieutenant that comes from SLCPD, and this brainchild coalition, if you will, is what's in charge of homelessness. Now, what the city does is enforce compliance laws, different policies that happen. Randy, I appreciate that you understood that people can freely come and go in the park. I think when we talk about enforcement of homelessness, there's a difference between trespassing, encampments, trying to congregate in spaces more permanently versus saying a wandering or a semi-permanent presence in an area. It's a little bit difficult to enforce. And what I'm trying to get to is that in this long-term vision, it seems like a reshuffling, and Detective Norgard and I worked closely where he was talking about Victory Road in putting up these no trespassing signs. It allows police department to come in and to be able to enforce without having to necessarily search for a warrant or grab more. Bob, if I misrepresented that, you can speak up to clarify more on whether you need a warrant or not to arrest some folks, or I think in especially looking and reshuffling and identifying who's a criminal and who is chronically homeless, because there's definitely a big difference between that and those individuals that are present. Oftentimes we see in these congregated spaces that there is a mix, and it is difficult to separate sometimes vulnerable populations from criminal activity. But for now, again, this is where it's at. Let me link that dashboard. I apologize. This makes it a little bit difficult to communicate, but I wanted to jump quickly to not take up too much time also so that we could get along with the meeting. But I put some links in here that I wanted to talk about specifically about these bond projects. On that link, you click on it and there's a map that shows different projects happening in the Capitol Hill area. So currently on 200 North, we're starting a project from 400 West. What's going to go on is new concrete pavement, installation of new sidewalks, driveway approaches, accessibility ramps, and ADA curb. And the projected cost for this project is $180,000 approximately. And I can put information. If you have any other questions, please contact Adan Carrillo from Civic Engagement. He's great. He's the engineering team's civic engagement person. And if any of you are either affected or live near the area or want to know more, he's going to be able to give a timeline specifically of when construction starts. Right now, they haven't started it yet, but it's projected in a month or two. And the next project that I wanted to talk about is on Wall Street from Columbus to 400 North. That whole asphalt road is going to be repaved. There's going to be a new installation of the sidewalks and driveway approaches and accessibility ramps and the curb. And that project is costing $170,000. So we're really excited again to be able to invest and put more money into the community to provide safer roadways and ADA accessibility for folks on the sidewalks especially. I also put the project for the surface treatment areas here that are outlined. And again, this is to go and repave roads, and that way people aren't spending more money on their cars, on their vehicles. This really affects especially tire usage in the city. There was a study done in 2019 that showed that Salt Lakers on average are constantly replacing their tires because their roads are so bad. So that's why it's important to look at our basic infrastructure and constantly look to update it as a city. And then today we did announce our new Salt Lake City innovations team. And what they're going to be working on right now is really looking internally at systems that we have, such as HR systems, processing systems. We get a lot of concerns and complaints about, for example, building permits or so any process really where constituents have to interact with Salt Lake City and our departments to be able to get permits or some sort of resolution from us to be able to do their work. So this really allows us to look deep in and to create smarter systems, whether that's looking at a CRM for constituent response, to look at live chat options, and really just work on our customer service as we try to provide a better role of an engagement for the city. Again, we're not a business, so it's never going to be the way businesses are more incentivized to reach out to you, but it is a way to engage with us and engage with bureaucratic processes, which is a lot different from being a consumer with a store. It's a lot different in that sense. And the final thing I wanted to share here is I was speaking with some folks in evidence at SLCPD, and they wanted me to remind you all that although it is winter, soon spring will be here, and a lot of folks will ride their bikes and go out and about. We ask that you please register them. That makes it a lot easier to find you and identify your bicycle in case it is misplaced, lost, stolen. We want to be able to match and identify bicycles, especially fancier bikes, mountain bikes, road bikes, etc., to their proper owner. And so if you could please take the time to do that, that would be wonderful. And I think I did share the link here with Mayor. She had an interview recently that I really liked and I wanted to share with you all. And it's her reflection of the first year again. So I'll take any other questions if anybody has any. One final thought, if no one has questions, David, I was going to mention.
I just thought I heard somebody.
Oh, apologies.
Muttering. I didn't know if they were trying to speak or. I guess not. Sorry. Go ahead.
No problem. I know council member mentioned
raising his hand.
Oh, I apologize. I didn't see that.
Anna has her hand up. I'm sorry, Anna. You have to unmute, Anna.
Sorry, David, I saw your hand up. Do you want to go first?
No, go ahead.
Well, Ava, thank you so much. I saw the link about the mayor's interview, but I didn't see the link about the homeless. And then also, I just want to say, back in the 80s, I tried to meet with Boston Mayor Flynn about the potholes in the road. And I'm really impressed that that you're here with that map. I just took a look at that too. But if you could so thank you. If you could put the link up for the homeless website that you were talking about, I'll put it on our website.
Thank you. It's going up again. Thanks for that. There it is. Let me know if it's not posted in the chat.
Thanks.
Okay, David.
Okay, so Ava, thank you for that information, and also kind of tossing it back to you, Bob, as well. If we put up no trespassing, so we've got a pretty big community up there who is going to be moving somewhere else. And I think where they're going to be moving is down into our neighborhood and or the park. How do we manage that, Ava?
Yeah. So I'm happy you asked that. That's something that both Detective Norgard and I are aware about, and it's been brought up several times in conversation. I'll let you know this. I can't reveal too much because we have to be careful about designating or sanctioning or rezoning an area to become a sanctioned campground. That's what the city's trying to avoid. Now, who can designate an area for a campground? Because we get lots of constituents that want that. They want an area away from their neighborhood somewhere to be designated for folks to go to, but they don't ever want it to be in their backyard. And we're hearing this all over the city. Yeah. And you know, I have a lot of neighbors, especially in downtown District 4. You go to Central 9th around Fleet Block and they go, well, this is basically a sanctioned area. You guys are just reshuffling them here. And that's really the difficulty that we're having is that, but in a short way to answer this quickly is we're aware of that issue. We're making sure that it's not being reshuffled. If anything, it is more beneficial to the community. And I know this isn't a critical answer. We're very aware that this is very symptomatic and this is not going in and fixing homelessness. Everybody in the city is aware of that. And again, the city is not the decision maker behind the long-term solutions of homelessness in this state. And the state currently is looking at creating a new homeless czar, which is how Greg Hughes got involved, if you remember back in 2018 with Operation Rio Grande. So what I'm getting to, again, David, we're aware, we're purposely trying not to push it. What we do in these circumstances is slowly break apart these encampments, find folks that are criminally active, you know, getting PD up there. As you heard, Detective Norgard is sending bike patrols and is very attentive and active up there. Folks that need services, making sure that the VOA is constantly helping them to get them into rehabilitation. Folks that are ready to get into housing, putting them in a situation where they can relearn how to be in housing, not just assuming that they can go into temporary housing, but reteaching folks how to care for their place so they're not automatically kicked out and found on the street again. And it is a slow process, my friend. I mean, it is frustrating, but more than anything, I think the biggest concern is exactly what you said. We don't want it to move into the neighborhood. We don't want it to get closer to safe neighborhoods. We'd like to keep it safe and separate. And so for many reasons, I will say Victory Road in many ways is something that we're not willing to reshuffle. So I hope that answers it as best as possible.
Okay, Judith.
Yeah, Eva, I had a question. I've noticed that along the foothills, there are zigzags now in many areas. Apparently, with some, I guess, city sanction, there have been trails cut all along the foothills. And I just wondered if there were going to be a lot more of those, and if maybe they were going to be reseeded, or if they're just going to be left to erode, or what the program is. With
Yeah, yeah.
trails.
Thanks for asking that, Judith. I will share with you a map. Actually, at the beginning of last year, folks from our trails and parks came to present to us that they were going to start building new trails. And so you will see a lot of that residual new trail building. So that is purposeful. And I will share that map so that you can see the new trails, how they link to main trail systems that exist currently in the foothills.
Are they going to remediate or seed them, or they just let them erode?
I actually have spoken, I walk the trails with Louis, blocking his last name, the head of the city's department that is building the trails. I was very concerned because it's really created kind of an eyesore in our backyard. And some other folks and I walked the trails with him in the fall. What you see is basically what they're planning to do. They didn't say that they had any more major plans in City Creek Canyon. They are counting on natural reseeding. They are not, as far as I was told, going to be doing any active restoration of any of the cuts along the trail. I'm personally waiting to see if that really works, because I can see plenty of other places in the canyon where similar cuts have never reseeded. But that's what I've been told.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, we have Senator Derek Kitchen with us, who is on a very short break from a very busy schedule. So Derek, why don't you go ahead?
Hi, David and everybody else. It's great to be with you today. Thanks for following up with me earlier. And you're right, we have 1 week left in the legislative session. So we have early mornings and late nights at this point. But I'm happy to be with you. I just got home and I took my jacket and my tie off. I hope you'll be okay with the casual attire this evening. But I'm so happy to be with you. I intended to come last month, but was unable to attend just due to scheduling issues. And so I'm happy to be with you today. I'm impressed with the turnout. I was just thumbing through all these little thumbnail photos of everybody, and I'm so happy to see all your shining faces out there. It's good to see you in the digital space. We have 8 days left in the 2021 general legislative session. I'm certain that many of you have been paying close attention to the news headlines and the policy proposals and the budgetary issues that we've been wrestling with over the last couple of weeks. It's a big session. It always is, but definitely this year with COVID-19 and the sort of disruptive 2020 that we had last year, we weren't sure exactly what things were going to operate like this session. We started out having the Capitol closed to the general public, primarily due to COVID concerns, but also because, if you recall, obviously issues relating to public safety and the Capitol insurrection, and some concerns that we had about organized groups putting something together to protest the Utah State Capitol. So we closed down right at the beginning, and about 2.5 weeks in, we did end up reopening the Capitol for the general public. So you are welcome to come in person to the Capitol if you desire. Obviously, there's some restrictions in terms of masking and things like that. But the good news is that all of our meetings are streamed online. So if there's something that you're interested in, you can plug in from your living room. You can provide public comment, and you don't even have to turn your camera on. So there's a lot of real great opportunities that perhaps have emerged from the COVID-19 crisis, and I imagine that many of these new tools will be here for the long haul in terms of engagement with the government. Um, so I realize I'm a politician, and we can sometimes be a little bit long-winded, but there were a number of things that I wanted to at least touch on um, really quickly, if you don't mind. As we get close to the end of the session, many decisions have already been made. For instance, tomorrow, Thursday, we are obligated constitutionally to have our budget finalized tomorrow. So we are wrapping up the $22 billion fiscal year 2022 state of Utah budget. And we do have surplus funds this year, which is why you hear various leaders, both from the Senate and the House of Representatives, speaking about tax cuts in various forms. But we also have an opportunity to make some really important investments in our community. And so a few of the things that I've really been focusing on regarding the budget, I have put forward a request for $15 million to be dedicated directly to the Olene Walker Housing Trust Fund. And for those of you that aren't aware, the Walker Trust Fund is a state program that's been around for a number of years. And Salt Lake City, Salt Lake County, many other municipalities around the state, as well as nonprofit developers, use this fund, this trust fund, to help make their affordable housing developments make financial sense. So it's a really important program that the state has for building and constructing primarily new affordable housing. As you probably know, just by looking around and being engaged, Utah is growing really fast, and our housing stock just simply isn't keeping up with our growth rate. And so $15 million is a lot on the one hand, but not nearly enough on the other. But it's a big ask. So I'm feeling really, really optimistic about getting that request funded this year. In addition to that, I've also requested $350,000 for the Utah Outdoor Association. This is a new business association that emerged after that debacle with outdoor retailers departing the state of Utah for Colorado. Maybe you recall that a few years back. So anyway, it's an effort that I've embarked on to try and pull the industry together and create more of a cohesive, a viable voice for itself in the state of Utah. It's a huge employer, a massive industry, and something that needs to be supported. On the policy front, I had a pretty ambitious agenda this year, and to be completely honest, sometimes it's sobering or humbling, let's say, to be a Democrat in the Utah legislature. I'm one of 6 Democrats in the state Senate out of 29, so we are in a position of what we call a super minority. And so that requires us, if we want to be successful with our policies, we have to really strike a middle ground on many of our policies. That being said, I did run a number of policies that were constituent focused, things that came to me as requests from constituents. You may have heard about them in the news. I'll just go through the ones that are not going to be successful this year just briefly. The first one is known as the Crown Act. That would have prohibited race-based hair discrimination in employment and housing and education. That one made it, to committee, and I had a really great, conversation, but it ended up falling flat. So that one I will run again next year. I also had a bill that would have allowed restaurants and bars to provide alcoholic beverages in sealed containers to go. This emerged obviously due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the rapidly shifting economic environment that we operate within. And so, for instance, you can order all your groceries online through Smith's or Harmon's. You can buy, milk, eggs, tampons, whatever you need. You cannot buy beer. And that's a problem. You can order takeout from a restaurant, but you cannot get a cocktail or a beer from a restaurant. And so I had hoped that maybe we would have more traction on that policy, but it's not going to have lift this year. I also ran a bill that would have directed Utah's electoral votes to the national popular vote. That one has a lot of support actually on the Republican side. But the word that I've heard from my colleagues is that this is not the year. Um, I suppose it's hard to run a bill like this after a Democrat wins nationally. So perhaps this will work down the road. And then I also had a bill that would have provided some really important structure and guardrails for municipalities as they begin to engage with billboard companies. I was unable to get that bill out of committee, but I'll run this one again next year. We could talk about billboards. There are two other what I call bad billboard bills out there, but we have successfully killed them in the Senate. So maybe we can talk about that another time. The two policies that I'm really excited about that I believe I'll be able to get across the finish line this year, in addition to the funding priorities that I already mentioned. The first one is an issue related to our criminal justice system. And this would right size the fees that county jails and the state penitentiary will charge for inmates to engage in communicating with their family members, either through a telephone call or through a Zoom correspondence. It will basically align the cost that an inmate is charged with a true market value. That way we don't have county jails making a profit off of inmates making phone calls to their loved ones. And so that one I believe will be successful this year. And then the other one is a really, really important one that I actually ran last year and got it out of the Senate, but it failed in the House. It's called, the short title is Family Planning Services. And what this would do is provide the full range of contraceptive services to about 11,000 Utah women that currently do not have access to healthcare. And so that includes the pill, it includes the patch, the ring, there's all kinds of contraceptives. There's about 11 major contraceptives that this would cover. And it's got a pretty big fiscal note attached to it, but the research shows that for every $1 invested in family planning services will save the state of Utah about $7. So for every $1, we save 7. So it's a good fiscal impact long term, and I have a lot of support on the Republican side for this. And so I'm really optimistic about this. I'll be actually presenting that tomorrow morning at about 7:45 a.m. in the House Health and Human Services Committee. So if anybody's up and eager to engage in policy that early, you're welcome to tune in. Before I depart and answer any questions, I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that are important to me. There's a lot of issues this year, so certainly I'll be missing something that matters to you, but just a few things that come to mind as I'm sitting here in terms of policy. I am prioritizing funding for the Homeless Services Coordinator. I heard Ava reference this a little bit ago, and it sort of emerged after Operation Rio Grande, and as former speaker Greg Hughes, he called it a homeless czar, which I hate that word. So it's a homeless services coordinator, and I'm prioritizing funding for that because I believe it's quite needed. I'm also pushing for the funding for double tracking of the Front Runner, which is that regional commuter rail. So not only double tracking it, but we need to electrify it. Currently it's run on diesel, and I would like to see those electric or battery powered. We're also making some pretty important policy moves on what's known as the troubled teen industry. Maybe you've heard about this in the news because we had Paris Hilton come and testify, but this is an issue that many people in the state of Utah have dealt with over the years. And it's high time that we put some guardrails around this industry because they've been getting away with a lot. I wanted to just quickly highlight that we are running low on blood. So if you are in a position to donate blood, please do. You can do that by going to utahblood.org, which is ARUP's website. They are the primary provider for the University of Utah, Huntsman Cancer Institute, Shriners Hospital. And then, of course, if you'd like, you can always go to the Utah Red Cross to donate blood as well. And so that's something that I'm pushing my constituents to engage with if they're interested. COVID-19 has put a lot of pressure on our health system, and for cancer patients in particular right now, we're having to go out of state for a blood supply. So if you can, please reach out, schedule an appointment and donate blood. So anyway, there's plenty more to discuss, but I figured I would maybe pause there and then maybe take a couple questions and a little dialogue.
Great. Thanks, Derek. Any questions for Derek? It's a lot to absorb.
Just, just thank you for all you're doing. Wholeheartedly.
I will ask regarding your open container or closed sealed container. I'm from Louisiana, so consider they think a closed container is a daiquiri without a straw in it, as long as you have a lid. Y'all aren't looking to go that level with it, are y'all?
No.
Okay, just checking. I wanted clarification on that because I could just see someone ordering from a daiquiri shop or something and having it delivered to their home. I didn't see that.
I would not oppose that for what it's worth. I mean, maybe there's some concerns on the public health front, but I mean, normalization of our liquor laws is definitely a priority of mine.
As a parent, I know that the 20-something-year-olds, when I was, basically all you do is just take the straw out of it or put the straw back in it, and it's not a good. In theory, I guess it'd be great for revenue, but as far as safety, I don't want to see that here. I think y'all are doing an amazing job and have done an amazing job. And looking back at Louisiana and where we left and why we left, there was definitely one of those as a reason. So I wouldn't be opposed to like the wine deliveries or something like that they're doing widespread, but I'm not a fan of the daiquiri to the door thing.
At least, the wine club would be great. If we could,
right.
If we could get a bottle of wine at like 11 p.m. from Harmon's or Smith's, that would be kind of nice. This is an economic development and a hospitality and tourism issue as well.
Right.
We're not quite there yet, but you got to take the long vision with Utah politics sometimes. So.
Exactly. Thank you very much for everything you do.
Yeah, Ken?
Hey, Derek, are there any issues? Are there any issues, Derek, that you think it would be helpful to have some citizen pressure on right now?
Is that Joanne?
Yeah.
It is.
Hi, Joanne. Oh boy.
I was thinking ranked choice voting. Is that still stuck in rules?
It is, but there's movement on it. This is one of those really interesting policies that actually attracts interest from both the far left, the far right, and a number of folks on the middle as well. And so, yeah, I mean, if that's something you're passionate about, now would be the time to build pressure. If there is going to be a successful policy this year, it'll come from Dan McKay in the Senate. And so you might consider looking up his bills online and putting a little bit of pressure behind that. I would say, a big issue today were the issues of billboards. I am we did kill a couple of them today in Senate, but I'm guessing that they'll come back. Maybe even tomorrow.
61 get killed?
Yeah, we sort of put it to rest, let's say, today, but there is still a pathway for it to come back to life, and I imagine that may be the case tomorrow. So I would stay in tune on that one. And then, just make sure that, I would say just emphasize to to legislators that, air quality, criminal justice reform, it's nice to have a tax cut, but like, should we maybe invest that more in our teachers? And should we maybe invest that in affordable housing? Should we, there are places in our budget that we could beef up, and rather than cutting taxes, for instance, and because we still have pretty low taxes. I mean, none of my constituents are complaining to me about taxes. So, yeah.
Any other questions? Ken, did you start to ask a question?
I did. I'm going to ask it right now to Derek Kitchen. Derek, not too long ago, somebody proposed a bill that would dramatically increase the registration fees on both electric vehicles and hybrids. I thought was the worst idea I'd ever heard of. Do you have any new info or an update on that one?
I'm not as close to that. I mean, I'm very aware of what you're referring to. I haven't seen it come to the Senate yet. I don't think it'll make it over to the Senate, which is good news. But one thing that I've learned from this year is that the issue, I mean, the gas tax is no longer doing what we used to rely on it for, funding infrastructure and things like that. It's just not keeping up. And obviously, in terms of people transitioning from gas-powered vehicles to electric, this conversation is far from over. I would like to see us move to a funding mechanism that is maybe based on the weight of the vehicle or even maybe miles driven, which would likely be an annual registration fee based on each individual's use. I had Mitt Romney in our caucus the other day, and he was speaking about a carbon tax. So there's some interesting things going on in the world these days. So I would say, with regard to your concern around that original bill, we need to have a conversation. I'm a big fan of being proactive. So when we see that there's a problem emerging, hey Mike, there you go. When we see a problem emerging in the policy discussions, it's one thing to kill a bill, but it's quite another to get out in front of it next year. And so I've been talking with Representative Joel Briscoe, who doesn't represent Capitol Hill, but he's definitely a friend of the family here. And we're talking about funding mechanisms that will help get out in front of some of these concerns with the gas tax and electric vehicles not paying their fair share.
Great. Thank you so much for that answer. One of the folks on the call has just sent me a note, or sent actually to the chat room a note, that the electric car tax has failed. So good news for now.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions for Derek?
And maybe I'll just wrap with this. Now is a hard time to get a hold of me if you have something serious to talk about, unless it's time sensitive and it's relating to the legislative session itself. But if any of you have policy ideas, I'll be hungry in March and April. So give me your ideas and let's start working. So I appreciate the time tonight, and don't be a stranger. I'm available on my legislative website, or you can follow me on the social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I'd love to engage with you there as well, and I appreciate your engagement here.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Derek. We appreciate the update. And hang in there. I honestly don't know how you guys do it. Okay, have a brief update from Catherine Kennedy from the Salt Lake City School District.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for giving me a few minutes tonight. I told David that I'd be very, very short since your time is very limited. You may have noticed that we voted for a new superintendent named Timothy Gadsden last night unanimously. He will probably begin on July 1st. Although his contract is not finished yet. So we're hoping that everything goes through smoothly and that he starts around July 1st when our interim superintendent his contract ends. So really pleased with him. He looks to be someone that's interested in equity, interested in student outcomes. And I think he'll be doing a good job. So we're really pleased with that. And we're hopeful that it will be a really great fit. I want to just give you a quick COVID update. Less than half our teachers have received the second vaccine, although we're close to that. And right now they're at the situation we're not giving anyone else first vaccines. You may have noticed that there's a new way that the county measures positivity, which makes our positivity and COVID numbers look much lower than they are. I'm not going to take the time to explain how that happened, but you can look at the Salt Lake Tribune article. If you just Google new way of Salt Lake County measuring positivity, you can see, or state measuring positivity, you can see the information there. So don't be fooled. Like I said, we're still at very risky levels. And I just wanted to maybe do a quick screen share to show you that. I think right now we have to look at national data rather than our own data, as well as our own data, but let's see.
I have to let you do that. Okay.
Did it go through?
Yep, you're good.
So here's today's from the New York Times. There are other national things to see, but this is a screenshot I just grabbed before our meeting tonight. And so dated today's date, February 23rd, and you can see that we're still at a very high risk level. So it looks like we're good, but actually we're not. So be sure that you're not deceived by that. We still are in sort of a risky place. I'm going to stop my share and just finish. I've got about 1 more minute of things. If you're interested in lobbying for something for your legislature and Senate, the SB 107 could use citizen pressure. I wanted to mention that both Jen Daly Provo and our wonderful senator who just talked to us, Derek Kitchen, have been very supportive to us. But this was a bill actually sponsored by Senator Weiler first, and it first threatened to take away our funding if we didn't return kids to school. Now it is requiring us to send all school children back 4 days a week. Right now, our kids are going 2 days a week for each set, and so it will double our students in our classrooms. So, and that we may be required to do that as early as March 4th. So that's not a bill that we like at all. And it's too bad that we're being forced to do things that we wouldn't choose to do if we had a choice. So that's Senate Bill 107, just one more time, sponsored by Senator Weiler, who was here last month. As you remember, he does represent some of the people that would be considered part of Capitol Hill. So any questions? I'll put my email in the chat, so you'll have it if you want to email me. But anyone?
I have a question. I've got a question. Is that 50% of teachers who received the vaccination, have they all been offered it and only 50% have accepted it? Or is that just the number you've gotten to so far?
So thanks for that clarifying question. I can't remember the percentage of teachers that have taken the vaccine. I think it's over 70% have taken the option to get the vaccine. I'll have to look up that number. It's around there. There'll be some that'll get it later. Some of them can't get it right now because they're pregnant or they have another issue. They've recently had COVID. So we expect that number to go up probably by 5 to 10%. And they can now get it through the Salt Lake County. And so what we have, what the 50% number is that 50% of the teachers who received the vaccine have not received have not received the second dose. So in other words, more than half our teachers are not fully covered, and they won't be fully covered, says the health professionals. And this is conservative, but it's still what the health professionals told us, is that they won't be covered until 2 weeks after they receive their vaccine, their second vaccine. So we're getting vaccinated on the district has a Thursday date. So probably tomorrow we will have about half of the people who receive the vaccine will be covered at that time, and they'll be 2 weeks away. But we're still a ways away from covering all of our employees. And like I said, we may be forced back into the classroom. And Anna, I will for sure put that bill number and in the chat. So go ahead.
One further clarification, how are charter schools figured into that? Do they?
Charter schools are also, were allowed the vaccine. And in fact, they got the vaccine much faster than we did. In fact, when we were at, I think it was 55 and up, they were finishing their 20-somethings. So there were 20-somethings in there. So at least that's from Wallace Stegner. I don't begrudge them that, but it would be really great if it would have been great if the county had rolled it out a little bit more evenly. For example, our superintendent was very ethical. He did not vaccinate anyone that didn't have a badge or an email address. Only those people were allowed, which left out some of our partner teachers, some of the people that say PTA's paid for, that are actually doing us a favor. Other people are doing us a favor by putting those teachers in our schools, arts teachers. There's a teacher I know, that works for the gifted music school that goes and teaches violin at the Mountain View, which is a school, a high poverty school in Glendale. And she didn't get a vaccine, for example. So I do know that Granite did not do as thorough a job vetting their takers of the vaccine. And I know, for example, that they offered some to SCC and FPTA people. Those things were quickly snatched up, and they certainly didn't give them to all of them. But I will just say that you should know that Salt Lake City School District was very, very ethical and careful about who was offered vaccines. And that is not necessarily true of our surrounding districts.
Okay, we need to move on. So Catherine has put her email in the chat box. If you have any further questions for her, you can contact her directly. Thank you very much, Catherine. So we're going to move on to one of our main presenters tonight, Loki Mulholland. We invited him in honor of Black History Month. The CHNC invited him to speak tonight as an award-winning filmmaker who makes documentaries on racial justice and equity issues. So with that, I will turn it over to Loki.
Maybe I should unmute. There we go.
You're perfect. Thank you.
I do these all the time, and yet I always forget to unmute. How's that work? But yeah, and I was just thinking about the schools, and I was actually just talking with, I did an assembly this morning with a school up in Salt Lake, and a group of fourth graders. It was really fascinating to listen to. I tell the story about my mom, and my mom is, can I do a quick screen share real quick?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, let's see if I can, oh, there we go, right on. So put it a little more in context. That's my mom. She says, it's a shame that most famous photo of me is at the back of my head, but that was the Jackson sit-in 1963. And she was, actually by the time she was 19 years old, she had been involved in about 3 dozen sit-ins and protests when she joined the Freedom Rides. And I'm gonna open this photo. Does that show a photo right now?
Yep.
Oh, great. Is it like a mugshot?
Yep.
Okay, because for some reason I can't see it now. But you know, when she joined the Freedom Rides, and they took that picture of her and put her on death row in Parchment Penitentiary. But she was kind of the Forrest Gump of civil rights, and name the person in the place and the event, and she was probably there or probably knew them. But she was heavily involved in the movement and was guided by, you know, her Christian upbringing. She's Presbyterian, and just the idea that, you know, we should treat each other the way we want to be treated. And she says all that, you know, good King James stuff. And when she was a kid, she actually had to memorize the Declaration of Independence, and she really took those things to heart. You know, that we're all created equal and endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. And you know, from that was her guiding principle. When she was 10 years old, she saw the realities of a separate but equal for what it truly was. And in a little, you know, schoolhouse in Oconee, Georgia, a little logging town. And the black schoolhouse was a one-room shack, just something you would, you know, see out of Hollywood today, right? And this is in stark contrast to a brand new brick school, post-World War II brick school in 1952 for the white students. You know, that had running water, had glass in the windows and paint on the walls and playgrounds and such, but the black school had nothing. And so she just said, you know, this is wrong and I'm going to do something about it. She didn't sit around waiting for other people to make those decisions. It was this ideal of truly what our country was founded on, these ideal principles. And ever since then, it's been a struggle to live up to those ideals, to the measure of what we believe we truly are as a nation, and constantly working towards that goal to achieve that. You know, so I talked to these kids in Salt Lake today, you know, via Zoom, of course, and it was fascinating to listen to them as I talked about these different things and my mother's story and how they see themselves in this. And the majority of the kids look, you know, it looked like a United Nations, quite frankly. It was wonderful to see, and the teacher was Muslim, and as I mentioned, I talked about the different things that people face. But when my mom was doing civil rights, it was like the television sets they had back then when they finally had one. You know, everything was black and white. It was very, you know, that was just how they saw that. And then today, you know, our TV sets are in color, and we see a lot more of the spectrum of things that are taking place that we need to address, and that are, you know, that there's a lot more going on that we're more aware of today. Not that those issues weren't there before, but we're more aware of them now. And that teacher said, yeah, you know, I you know, she didn't say it in front of her kids, she private chat, but she's, or an email, she actually said, yes, I actually, you know, still deal with you know, religious persecution here in Utah for being a Muslim. And these are the people in our communities that while we might not personally face some of those issues, that doesn't mean they're not real. And that we have to, you know, be willing to be aware of those things. I did a film called Black, White, and Us, which was about racism through the lens of transracial adoptions in Utah. And it's about white families who adopt these black children. And these parents actually believe that racism was over, right? Obama was elected president. We've arrived as a country. Everything's great. And then they've adopted these children. And that's when everything becomes real for them. Because in their schools, in their churches, in their neighbors, even in their own families, the ugliness comes out. And what they have to do, the choice they have to make to confront that. Do they believe their children and side with them, or do they just brush it off and go on? But now racism is right there. They can actually experience it because of what they're seeing and feeling and such. And so for all of us, that's the point of the film is, do we believe our friends and our neighbors, the people we interact with on a daily basis or that we represent when they come with us with the issues that might not be our experiences, but it's definitely theirs. I've done here, I live here in Lehigh. I'm actually in Orem right now in my office, but in Lehigh, we have one of those weird crossovers at Pioneer Crossing where all of a sudden, you come off the road and you turn left and you're British, and then you get back on the right side of the road and keep going, the little diamond exchange, whatever they call it. And there's these signs up there that say, they had to put several up there because no one could understand what was going on. But you have to stop on red and yield to through traffic. But then you can make a left turn, which is obviously not intuitive, but you have to stop on red. And I came up to this to the red light. I saw the police officer next to me, and I turned to my son and said, "I'm going." And so I stopped on a red, put my turn signal on, no through traffic, and I left and I went. And the police officer said, after he pulled me over, do you know why I pulled you over? I said, I have no idea, right? No, I mean, I pretty much knew. I guess I wasn't quite lying, but maybe there's something else going on in my car. He says, well, you made, you turned left on red. I said, well, yeah. So you can't do that. I said, no, there's a sign right there. And as a matter of fact, there's two signs. And, you can Google map it. And he says, I'm not going to argue with you. I said, well, good. There's nothing to argue about. It's your, registration and, blah, blah, blah. And I was, yeah, there you go. So he went back to his squad car, and I knew what he was doing. He was calling up to find out who was right and who was wrong, and run anything else on me that he could. Goes back to my car, doesn't say a word, just stands and says, you're on you're free to go. I said, great. Well, I told some of my African-American friends up in Salt Lake City about this. I said, do you think you could have pulled that stunt? They said, we would never even thought to do it. Because you can get away with that. When my friend gets in his car, he has to think about where his wallet is. Now, this is a Pastor Lynch, Martin Lynch. He's football player type, former football player anyway. So he's a big guy, nice as can be. But when he gets in his car, the first thing he has to think about is where is his wallet? Not because he took too many hits to the head, but because he doesn't want that perception that he might be reaching for something. Now, all I do is get in my car and turn on the ignition, right? Seatbelt first, of course. But those are the things never even crossed my mind. I never even, I could sit here and go, I know I'm in the right with that police officer. And I knew I was going to win that no matter where it was going to go. But he said, I would never even, it would never even cross my mind to even pull that stunt because I knew exactly how that could end. And it would not end the same way it would for me. Now, the reason that never crossed my mind, because that's not my lived experience or my community's experience in that respect. But, I say that just to kind of illustrate a point of how we live and where we live. And Utah is a great place. I've been here for 20 years. I'm from Virginia, born and raised. My wife's from Blanding. People are like, how'd you ever get to Utah? And I'm like, well, my wife's from Blanding. She's a Blandonite, right? And miracles and miracles, wherever we go and we talk about Utah and Blanding, someone knows her family from somewhere. It's weird. Everyone in Blanding knows everyone, and there's only like 4,000 people, but it seems like there's 20 million or something. But you know, we've been here, and it's been a great experience for us. It's been an eye opener. It's a little different than like Louisiana, for example. Definitely different than Mississippi and the world my mom, you know, was living at her time. But I've been able to, you know, be a part of a community, to be able to see how things work and where we're at, and are we where we need to be as a country? No. Are we making progress? You bet. You know, I was listening to my mom and Joanne Blackman Bland, who was on Edmund Pettus Bridge as an 11-year-old when she got beaten by the cops on Bloody Sunday with John Lewis and others. And someone asked her that question. She says, well, we'd be naive to say that we haven't gotten anywhere. You know, look, we don't have slavery. We don't have Jim Crow. The outward manifestations, the legal segregation, that's done away with. Now we got to deal with the foundation of racism. I know Representative Hollins, you know, is working on a bill that's, gosh, I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's about, actually, I know, it is to declare racism a public health crisis in Utah, which sounds odd until you understand how racism impacts people of color all across the spectrum. In Virginia, where I'm from, the capital of the Confederacy is set to become the first Southern state to declare racism a public health crisis. And when I tell people I live in Utah, I never tell them I'm from Utah because I don't want that holy war going on. You know, I am a Latter-day Saint, but I just don't want to go there with everyone. And that sometimes that comes up and I got to deal with that because I'm in Utah. But I always tell them I'm from Virginia, right? And when I say I live in Utah, every stereotype you can think of comes out, and it's disheartening. But then, just recently, I just finished a film about Amendment C from last year. That was to strip the language of slavery out of the Constitution, the Utah State Constitution. And I said, you know, well, it passed by 80%. 80% of the voters said, yes, this should be taken out. They said, only 80? I said, hey, Colorado, it took them twice. As a matter of fact, Utah has the best number. We beat Nebraska and anyone else. So we got a lot going for us, but we have a lot more that we need to work on. And the economic impact and everything else that comes along with the diversity and inclusion is real, and we should be, you know, taking a look at that and such. So I see a hand up.
Yeah, are you ready to take a couple of questions?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
I don't know how long you needed me to pontificate. So
no, this is great. This is great. Anna, why don't you go ahead?
Thanks. I have a couple questions, but I definitely don't want to take up a lot of time because I think we only have like 15 minutes. So I guess you can hit whichever one you want. One was that I saw that you were the first white person admitted into a all black fraternity here in Utah.
Like I said, fraternity. Yeah.
And so I'm pretty curious why, and also how that was received in the. I'm getting pinged. Sorry. In the fraternity.
Yeah.
And then the other question would be what I mean, there's some obvious things that we can do, you know, in our own neighborhood, you know, when you just not to be, you know, a bad person ourselves. But if there's anything that you can inspire us to maybe do to, yeah, like we're all white here, you know, we don't even have any black people on this call, which is.
You do.
Oh, we do?
Yeah.
Me? You! Yay! Fatima, thank you for being here. Okay, now I'm happy. So Fatima, this question could be for you too. How do we, be more inclusive? And do you think that we already are? Yeah, if we don't seem welcoming I want you to tell us what we're doing, because I've never seen you on our call before, and I'm so happy you're here. And yeah, I'd love to grow this group.
Yeah.
And those are my questions.
Okay, well, let me answer that one question in regards to the fraternity itself. So my mom, there's a sorority called Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, which is, what is that noise? Okay. Anyways, sorry. I could hear like water.
Somebody's pouring a drink or something.
That's what it is. But so Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, which there's 9 traditional Black fraternity and sororities called the Divine Nine, and that were created because, well, they weren't allowed into white, establishments and so forth in that regards, and but they weren't necessarily designed traditionally just to be all African American. My mom is recognized as the first white member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority, and so for me, it was a natural thing to be involved with the Omegas from that standpoint. When I asked my mother, which one should I join? She said, well, the Omegas. And I said, well, why them? And she says, well, there's a lot of fine looking men in the Omegas. I said, okay, Mom, I don't need to hear that. You're my mom. So, and you're 78. But, it's just an organization that here in Utah does a lot of work in the community with, scholarships and working with the Boys and Girls Club, and just a lot of great work, and that was in harmony with what I was doing. I was friends with most of the people in that fraternity, anyways, and so it was just a natural fit for me. I just happened to be the first white one here, and it was well received. I mean, once we proved that I was worthy to be a part of that fraternity. Yeah, I mean, once you're in, right? So, yeah, it was no big deal from that standpoint. I mean, it is, but it isn't, right? But I get that question a lot, so I'm not surprised by it. And so yeah, I mean, majority of us here in this call is white, and but the what we can do, when I talk to people is, when I'm, it's lead with love, right? I mean, we get back to the basic principles of the 2 main principles that our country is founded on, right? I think we all believe in America. I mean, when we these kids, I mean, I probably didn't do it here, but I know on the floor of the house they probably did it. We got this Pledge of Allegiance, even, and that's a call saying that I stand for civil rights, for goodness sakes, liberty and justice for all. I mean, and if we don't believe these things, then what are we doing, right? That's America. America is about this. Doesn't mean we're perfect, because we're trying to form a more perfect union, but it takes all of us to make that difference. And we all need to be striving for that and to overcome those biases. None of us get out of this, scot-free when it comes to biases. Everyone has biases. We're biologically designed that way. White, black, male, female, doesn't matter. But we've been conditioned to think certain things through education, through society, through, I mean, I could go on forever about this, but how we work through that. My mom, my grandmother was a segregationist to the day she died. Her last words to my mom was, Joni, they've got me in a colored room, because the lady next door to her with that little curtain was Black. That was her last words to her. That's what she was raised on. I might be poor. She was born a sharecropper with a dirt floor, right? Or a house. And she was raised with the idea that I might be poor, but at least I'm not Black. Plain and simple. My mom, our family goes back to Jamestown, 1610. We were one of the original planter elites. We served in the House of Burgesses. We helped start the whole thing, right? But my mom, even though she's raised on that diet, says, you know what, this is what I believe, which is what she was taught in the Bible and what she was taught in school in respect to the Declaration of Independence. Now, when she went to school, they had to stand and sing Dixie, not the national anthem and stuff. But she just said, you know what, this is wrong and I'm going to do something about it. And she says, it's I wish I could find some complicated answer, but it's just lead with love and work to live to work and to understand that your experiences aren't the same as everyone else's.
I really, really hate to do this.
No, I
But
understand.
we have another speaker. It was probably unwise of us to schedule two speakers in the same evening, because this is a topic that clearly needs a great deal of discussion. I want to thank you very much for being here. And I hope that this will just be the beginning of a discussion in the Capitol Community Council about issues of race and equality and justice.
I dropped my email in there. So
Okay,
anyone
great.
wants to reach out and such as well. And then tomorrow night we are doing, if I may do a quick cheap plug, we are doing a screening tomorrow of Amendment C, which is called the End of Slavery, the Fight for Amendment C. Weber State's hosting that. Representative Hollins is going to be speaking there as well, all on Zoom and such.
Okay.
So you'll all check that out. And I appreciate the time. I can get off and pontificate a whole bunch. So, just got to pull the plug. So I appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks again.
Right. Take care now.
Okay. Brian, thanks for your patience.
Hello. Yeah, it's well, let's roll right into Taylor Anderson from Sweet Streets, a nonprofit that advocates, that educates and advocates for transportation design to improve neighborhoods and cities. So without further ado, we have a meeting on Tuesday that Taylor's also going to be joining for Transportation Committee, where we're going to be working on your immediate location in the neighborhood on our traffic model. So keep that in mind. And here we go, Taylor Anderson. Thank you.
I really hate to cut Loki off there because that was a great conversation. So my apologies, but I do appreciate the time to be here. I put a couple slides together just for something to look at and reference. If David, is that all right if I share my screen?
Yeah, go ahead.
Cool. Thank you. I'm just going to assume that I have the right thing up. Yeah, like Brian mentioned, we're a new group. We went to start last year. We were going to have a big meeting in March, and we'll fast forward 12 months. We ended up meeting mostly online like everybody else, like we're doing tonight. But basically, we're a group of people that got together because we felt like the city has great intentions and great plans for its streets. But a lot of those plans we felt weren't getting implemented, either because of budget or because of lack of political backing, essentially, for implementing those plans. It's tough to do what the city has planned for itself and for its streets, all of our streets. And we thought we would at least form a collective of people who shared a vision for people for streets, make them more walkable, more bikeable, transit friendly, easier for the disabled to get around, because right now there are plenty of sore spots on that front. And we just wanted to be that voice. Streets make up 80% of our public space. When you walk out your front door, 80% of the world that you're going to interact with until you get to a private space is a street. And so we just wanted to be the group to fight for all of us, make it safer and easier, give you options to get around so that it's not just hopping in the car as your only convenient and safe option. So that's the background of what we're doing. And if anybody has questions throughout this or want to interject, feel free. I would love to have this more interactive than giving a presentation, but my wife is a graphic designer, so we have these nice slides to look at too. Hopefully you can see those. Couple of things that we've been focusing on, really safe speeds is kind of the core of what we're doing. Not only are we trying to make things more convenient for getting around, but we're just trying to make it safer. That's kind of the foundation of everything. And the key to get there is speed. I think we all understand that higher speeds are more dangerous when there's an unfortunate crash between a car and a person, whether that person's on a bike or in a wheelchair or in a car and walking around or in a car. So we're really focused on ways that we can make the neighborhood streets safer. And I'm guessing that Tom Millar or somebody from transportation has come to give a presentation on this. And with that, actually, I'm going to pause and say, there was an early draft of the agenda that suggested I was with the city. I want to make clear I'm a volunteer. I'm a private citizen. I used to live in Marmalade. I wish I still lived there, but I live in Liberty Wells now. I'm not affiliated with the city whatsoever. So I just wanted to clear that up so nobody thought I was speaking on behalf of the city. But the city does have a plan that they are working on, and we're trying to support it. It's called Street Typologies. If you have not heard of it, it's basically, right now there are only 3 types of streets. Typologies means the type of street, whether local, collector, or arterial. And you can think of that as like a funnel from the safest neighborhood, slow speed street, to arterial, which would be 3rd West, 4th West, Victory Road, the higher speed, higher traffic places. What typologies would do is create 15 types of street. And why it's so important is that it's going to affect everywhere you go. It's the street in front of your house. It's almost 10,000 segments of street throughout the city. So it's on your way to the grocery store, on your way to work, the street in front of your house is going to get a new typology or type of street. And the reason that we view that is so important is because there's going to be a design speed in the typology. So the city is going to say, Brian, you live on this type of street. We view that as a 20 or 25 or 15 mile an hour street. So from that point on, it's not going to change overnight, but over time, anytime the city works on Brian's street, they're going to say, hey, it's this type. We view this as a safe place to go X miles an hour. And that's how they're going to treat that street from that point on until it changes the plan in a generation or two. And so we're trying to raise the alarm to neighborhoods across the city to just make sure there's going to be another public comment period where you can weigh in. You can look at how the city views your street and the streets that you interact with, and really every street in town. And you can see if you agree, disagree. You might want to advocate for changes to that, because again, it's going to impact your everyday life. But the really cool thing is the design speed, because the city would like to kind of lower car speeds to keep us all safe. And this is a way to gradually do that over time. Again, it's a long process. We're talking about a generation literally or more. And it's like whenever they get funding to work on 200 West or to work on 400, any street in town, then at that point, after this is adopted, you would start to see changes based on what the typology is. But I just wanted to highlight kind of, again, that core principle of safe speeds, and why I keep bringing up 20 miles an hour. Because here in my neighborhood, and I've heard from Brian and some others in Marmalade and Capitol Hill, that you have some speeding issues. And hopefully there's already a sentiment that we are looking for slowing cars down through the neighborhood, basically. I've heard a lot of your acute problems with people cutting through to get to the Capitol, to get to Research Park, to get downtown, and they're using your what should be neighborhood streets to get there, and maybe getting off the highway to go onto a street that really should be 20 or 25 miles an hour. And really, it is so key to keep things at closer to 20 miles an hour rather than 30. You have Washington Elementary on 200 West, you have the library, you have houses, places that people go, and it's just so much safer. I wanted to illustrate that point with this graph that's pretty enlightening, because really as you get closer to 30 miles an hour, it's exponential how much more dangerous, especially for people who are 60 years old and older. It's why we've really highlighted, and maybe at some point we would come up with a 20 mile an hour campaign to try to get all neighborhood or local streets. The default right now is 25 miles an hour or 30 miles an hour. We would love to see it closer to the bottom of the bell curve here, because if and when there are incidents between cars and people, it is just so much more likely that you will survive and not have significant injuries if you're hit by a car going 20 miles an hour rather than 30. Hate to be all doom and gloom like that, but really it does happen. And whether it's a kid, whether it's you or me, I would love it if the car is going as slow, as convenient, and as safe as possible. So I wanted to highlight that. This chart is from the National Association for City Transportation Officials. It's like the guiding principle for designing and operating city streets. I know I'm running through this pretty quick. I wanted to stay on time because I know folks are busy tonight, but 2 more things that we're focused on. You guys are actually really lucky coming from Capitol Hill and Marmalade, not only because you have one of the most beautiful neighborhoods in town, really jealous, of how pretty all your historic homes are. But you actually have your transportation committee that has been working. Some of you might have been working on it as well. I know it's not just Brian, but the city's going to bring back a traffic calming plan. It hasn't had one since 2003. And that's the ways that it can design. It can add interventions here and there to actually make it less convenient to drive 30 miles an hour, 35 miles an hour through neighborhoods. It hasn't had a program since 2003, and it's thinking about bringing one back. But why you all are lucky is that your transportation subcommittee has been working for almost a year and a half on a neighborhood-wide plan that would have different elements and speed signs that would have 20 miles an hour, even I guess 15 miles an hour in some places. Speeds that are more appropriate for the streets that you all have throughout your neighborhood, some really narrow places, some hilly areas that people might be enticed to go faster down. So you're kind of way ahead of the pack from where every other neighborhood in the city is right now, because they're talking about a plan, whereas you guys are actually at the implementation phase, as long as the city can hear from people who support it. So kind of wanted to do that, use my time to introduce myself, what Sweet Streets is, invite anybody who's interested to come along. Really, it's kind of an awareness campaign to back the city up when it needs backing up for some of the plans that they want to do, but then also to advocate for new ideas and things like your Capitol Hill traffic calming plan. So Brian, I don't know if you want to take over and talk a little bit about that. I know we're up against the 8 o'clock hour here, but if anybody has any questions they want to allow that me, I can add my contact info in the chat, or we can do it right now, either way.
Okay, would you mind unsharing your screen, Taylor?
Yep, right now.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Brian.
Yeah, thank you, Taylor. Taylor's been working closely with, he actually, you should follow, do you want to speak to, Building Salt Lake City at all, or Sweet Streets, or actually direct us to your website, because it's really cutting edge, and they're working closely with the city on a lot of policy issues.
Yeah, I do run the news website, Building Salt Lake. So if for all the new beautiful condos you're getting throughout Marmalade, probably written about those. But we try to keep them separate. And this is just the streets advocacy channel, and that's something else. But I just shared my the URL in the chat if anybody wants to venture over to the website and see more about what we're about.
Yeah, so I should say Taylor, met with John Larson, with whom we meet, every other month, and Taylor can confirm that they're very much working on the implementing our traffic calming model, and so we're quite excited. The early stages are speed limit sign, speed sign reduction. So that's like the first phase, and that's one of the things that Taylor's going to be at our meeting on Tuesday, and we're going to actually look at block by block for whomever shows up on details, and there's also a petition coming out. Take a look at the chat for a link to that meeting. Anybody have any questions for Taylor?
All good. If not, I would just encourage you guys to go over to the website if you're interested at all. We've got contact information. You can get in touch through there if you have any questions or ideas later on. Just feel free to reach out. Anna, it looks like you might have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you so much for what you're doing. I did check out, I haven't checked out, or maybe I did, your website, but I saw your Facebook page, and I think it's really cool what you're doing, and thank you.
Great, thanks a lot.
Do you have your website on the chat room, Taylor?
Yeah, it's in there.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So thank you again for all your time. I appreciate it. And feel free, like I said, to reach out if you'd like to talk any more about any of this, and support Brian and all the work that your neighborhood's already doing on this front.
We have a pretty big committee of people, and have the board members on this call or in the committee. So
great.
It's a lot. Thank you.
Awesome. Good work.
All right. Thank you very much, Taylor. That was very good. Okay. It is a little past 8, so we're about ready to wrap up. Does anybody have anything that they would like to say to the group? Okay. Well, in that case, thank you everybody for coming. And keep an eye out in your email for announcements about future meetings. Our next one will be March 17th, unless it is moved for some reason, but that's when it's scheduled. March 17th at 6:30. Keep checking your email on our website. There's all kinds of useful information on there. And I must say, it looks very nice thanks to Anna's efforts. So thank you all. And
I think we still have, I was going to say, I'd like to share information with the speakers, or the speaker that we had, Loki. I'd like to share his information, but I'd also like to share Fatima's information, if she's okay with that, before she goes, because we definitely would love to have you guys come back and speak and visit with us and help us diversify, show everyone in the neighborhood represented equally. So thank you for coming. I just wanted to tell them thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for inviting us. I definitely look forward to having more opportunities to connect with you guys and to have spaces that are more inclusive and more equitable. That's what we're trying to do here at the Salt Lake City Mayor's Office. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Fatima Deary. I'm the policy advisor for Mayor Mendenhall's office, and I've been there for over 5 years now with the previous administration. So we're working on a lot of policies, a lot of things that we're trying to do, but we'll be happy to come back and figure out what else we can do to really be more creative, more integration is needed. And so I still appreciate being invited to this space, and I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're done. Everybody have a pleasant evening. I look forward to seeing you all soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.